As you have heard, recording is in progress. Let me come back to the different levels of governance: city, peri-urban, and the national context. Exchange and collaboration between these layers of governance is important to move towards sustainable food systems and to effectively act upon the outcomes that we expect to come from the UN Food Systems Summit and the currently developed game changers under that. By putting into place multi-stakeholder mechanisms, countries establish more participatory policy planning processes and do create environments where actors can collectively negotiate, implement, and evaluate priorities of food systems transformation while building a shared understanding of the synergies and also the trade-offs amongst diverse sectors and subsectors, the different scales, and the different stakeholders. But what ensures multi-stakeholder collaboration mechanisms to work effectively, and what will ensure them to deliver on the summit's results now and beyond? These are some of the questions that this pre-summit affiliated event aims to discuss with our distinguished panel and all of you today. Our discussions on multi-stakeholder collaboration, as well as the initiatives that will be presented today, do contribute directly to the work innovation lever and under the governance and planning action area. And moreover, they do connect with the coalitions of actions that are being put forward by the summit leadership. And we'll look towards making them fully operational by the time of the summit. So in sum, the main objectives of the session are to highlight the importance of improving governance and multi-stakeholder partnerships to achieve sustainable food systems. The second, to showcase good practices and innovative models of multi-stakeholder collaboration for the food systems transformation by cities and countries. And the third, to discuss principles for successful, inclusive, and equitable food systems governance and to support the work of the innovation leader and the governance and planning action area. And now the presentations of the agenda will be also shown on the screen. And the session really starts with a keynote speech. We're very pleased to have Cristina Eghenter, Global Governance Policy Coordinator of WWF, with us to speak on the multi-stakeholder mechanisms based on a new piece of research by the One Planet Network Sustainable Food Systems Program on those mechanisms. And this will be followed by a panel discussion. Here we will hear from the practical experiences of the Food Security Committee of La Paz, Bolivia, and of the National Planning Committee in Uganda. And we will hear the view of representatives from UNDP, OECD, and Governance Action Track about how the governance and policy are critical for the success of the summit. And with that, we'll move to an interactive poll with the audience on the principles for multi-stakeholder cooperation, and then we'll finalize with closing remarks and a wrap-up by Ireland's Special Envoy on the food systems and by the head of International Affairs and Food Security of the Ministry of Agriculture in Switzerland. And questions, I want to remind you, can be posted through the question box. And with that, I would like to hand over to our keynote speaker, Cristina Eghenter from WWF, and also the co-lead of the One Planet Network Sustainable Food Systems Program. Cristina, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the co-organizing institution, all the participants for making this important session possible. The session is important because we aim to highlight an important governance dimension to solving the complex, interrelated, dire issues that afflict our food systems. This proposed solution is that food systems issues need to be tackled with a systematic, holistic, and inclusive perspective. As we know, current food systems contribute to 30% of greenhouse gases, suffer from climate change-induced shocks. Between 700 and 800 billion people suffer from hunger in 2020 alone. 30% of the food is lost or wasted. About 70% of land conversion is driven by food. Fishing stocks are being depleted at unsustainable rate. Most of the poor live in rural environments where food is produced. Food systems are one of the biggest threats to nature and people, but their transformation represents the greatest opportunity to achieving the SDGs. The proposed solution has been indicated already by multilateral declaration, including UN General Assembly, as well as scientific expert panel reports, such as IPBES and IPCC. This idea has also been championed by the UN One Planet Network Sustainable Food System Program that we at WWF have been co-leading with the governments of Costa Rica and Switzerland. So what do we mean when we say that policy to transition to sustainable and equitable food systems need to be designed holistically and inclusively? It means that we need to link the interrelated areas and sectors such as agriculture, nutrition, environment, health, trade, etc., and do it at all multiple levels of governance, local, subnational, national, regional, and so on. To link these areas and these sectors, we need to convene all key actors, including those that are negatively affected by the shortcomings of our food systems. As concluded in the third global conference of the One Planet Network Sustainable Food Systems Program, and as expressed in landmark reports like the IPBES report of the and the IPCC land use report, addressing holistically these multiple complex challenges can be done by establishing inclusive multi-stakeholder and right holders mechanism and platform to build trust and knowledge among all actors and guide collaboration by actively linking such bodies to the policy-making process. Food system governance must be urgently rekindled to address current power imbalances and actively work to engage the most marginalized actors in the food systems to develop and implement, to help develop and implement solutions. We're talking about smallholder farmers, rural food producers, fishers, indigenous people, women. But multi-stakeholder, multi-actor collaboration is a challenge, especially in light of existing structural asymmetries. How can we do it better? A study by the Sustainable Food System Program has examined 10 cases of multi-stakeholder mechanisms and found that it takes more than political will to create an effective multi-stakeholder mechanism. It requires, for instance, a policy reform process to be in place. Building successful collaboration takes time, and we need to take the time to allow the muddling through differences and what might be separate visions to seek points of convergence. Funding, institutionalization, including a clear mandate for multi-stakeholder mechanisms are crucial. It is important to engage a wide range of actors with clear roles in food production, distribution, and consumptions at all levels of governments and connect them for greater impact. It's important to define and agree on principles and terms of engagement that safeguard an open, respectful space for multi-stakeholders governance to function in optimal ways. Effective leadership, inclusive, collaborative leadership is paramount to help tip the balance of power, because as the study underscores, addressing power imbalances in our food system is critical. Thank you all for your kind attention, and back over to you, Chair, for what sounds to be an exciting panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cristina, for having sent us off so well with your introduction and highlighting the importance of those principles to create the safe space for the collaboration and finding the points of convergence, as you said. We now get into our panel discussion that I announced earlier, and here we have first our representatives of city and national multi-stakeholder collaboration mechanisms that we would kindly ask to share their experience. We have María Teresa Nogales, the Executive Director of Fundación Alternativas from Lima, Bolivia. And we have Professor Pamela Mbabazi, the Chairperson of the National Planning Committee in Uganda. And I'm very happy to present both of you. And well, we have already one camera on. I understand for Pamela, yes, here you are as well. For bandwidth issues, you may have to switch off the camera, so apologies to everybody already up front. Now, the question that I'd like to pose to both of you is really to share an example where multi-stakeholder collaboration with regards to food systems policy and governance has worked, and what were the ingredients of success? Over to you. Maybe María Teresa first and then Pamela. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning from Bolivia. It's very nice to be here. Yeah, well, let's see, in 2017, the La Paz Municipal Food Security Committee worked on what we called a proposal denominated the Urban Food Agenda for Food Security. And it was interesting because we weren't quite sure how this proposal was going to be received by the national government because it was a national policy proposal. In 2019, interestingly enough, the national government started working with UN Habitat on the national urban agenda. And it was at that point that we were able to go and share our food security proposal. And interestingly enough, the government officials were surprised to notice that they had forgotten to include a food systems approach and food security components into the new national urban agenda. And so it ended up being a perfect partnership. And today we already have the national urban agenda, and it does include a food systems approach and different actionable items related to guaranteeing food security. And I think in terms of our successful ingredients were the following. One, we had actually gathered many voices because the committees had actually worked in partnership with other cities and other food security committees around Bolivia. And so we already had ensured that our proposal was representative of the needs of different food systems actors. I think additionally, because we had worked through a series of workshops to create this proposal, we had a very clear understanding of the challenges, and we were able to transmit those challenges to the government officials. Additionally, we had a written proposal, which I think was very, made it easier to transmit all this information to the national government and UN Habitat. Clearly, having contacts with both the national government and UN Habitat was a key ingredient in that moment. But additionally, we were ready to present our ideas and subsequently really roll up our sleeves and offer to contribute in helping to formulate the contents of the national urban agenda as relates to food security and food systems. And I think finally, one of the last important ingredients was that the committee already had a successful track record in actually presenting policy proposals and working alongside government to either develop public policy or actually go through and elaborate legislation together. So I think these are the many components that make sure that we can work together successfully. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing this experience. Pretty amazing. With that, we move to Uganda. Pamela, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I am pleased to be given this opportunity. Indeed, Uganda affirms the importance of sustainable production, distribution, and marketing of food in enhancing livelihoods of its citizens, particularly those that are most at risk, like women, youth, and the disadvantaged persons. Of course, you're aware that derive their life, given the dominance of agriculture as our source of livelihood for the majority. Developing sustainable, resilient, and inclusive food systems offers our country a great opportunity to end hunger, achieve food security, improve nutrition, advance equitable livelihoods, and transition into a modern industrial economy. And effective food governance, of course, plays a critical role in this process. So consequently, we've adopted a value chain approach in identifying and tackling the challenges that have constrained our country in building sustainable food systems and a healthy nutrition pattern. And these 4 stages of the agriculture value chain include the production and productivity of our resources, post-harvest handling and storage, which we consider to be very critical for us, agro-processing and value addition, but also market access and competitiveness of agricultural products in domestic and international markets. And it's along these 4 stages of the value chain that we have identified in our planning and implementation frameworks who are the players, which laws and policies and regulations are either missing or counterproductive in the building of sustainable food systems, but also the roles that each institution is supposed to play in this process. And by focusing on correctly identifying and properly assigning roles that each stakeholder should play and identifying the laws and policies which should either be enacted, repealed, or amended, we are starting to see turnarounds in the production of a number of our agricultural commodities like coffee, like dairy, like sugarcane. So it is important to look at stakeholders more holistically, to also include the private sector, the civil society, and for institutions and laws to include environmental management, but also multi-stakeholder consultation and participation. And equally important is the effective coordination of these various stakeholders. So indeed, I want to stress that food systems governance provides the foundation for food systems transformation and sustainability. And effective food systems governance must include strong commitment, leadership, capacity, and accountability, which we're struggling and trying to implement here, of course, in line with the SDGs. But food systems in Uganda, and as I end, food systems governance in Uganda has followed an inclusive, multi-sector and multidisciplinary approach with deliberate efforts having been made to bring on diverse stakeholders along the value chain, as I elaborated. And it's the Office of the Prime Minister that is constitutionally mandated to lead government business and ensure coordination amongst government ministries. So we've indeed leveraged on this constitutional provision of the Office of the Prime Minister, and it is the Office of the Prime Minister that is the country convener and lead in preparations of the UN System Summit, which we are using as a stepping stone to really check ourselves as a country, to take stock of where we are in terms of strengthening and building our food systems. And together with the Ministry of Agriculture, the National Planning Authority, we have been able to work together to, get all stakeholders to really rethink and recommit and re-energize and see how together we can really move forwards in putting in place the clear systems. And within this, our National Development Plan clearly stipulates the key interventions that need to be done, but we've also come up with an innovation at the lowest level of government. This is at the parish model. So government has rolled out what they call the parish development model at the lowest unit of government to bring together different stakeholders to assess, understand where the gaps are in terms of food systems development at the lowest level and come up with interventions that we're going to work on through. So this is what we have done. It's still work in progress, but there's been a galvanized move to work together as one government. I thank you.
Thank you very much. So for this vibrant contribution as well, that highlights so well the different ingredients from highest political engagement to making good use of, provisions that are out there and bringing people together. And you already started hinting at how can we connect things to the UN Food System Summit? How can we transpire some of those things into the outcomes? And that will be the focus of our next sub-panel. And here I'm very happy to introduce Andrew Bovarnick. He's the Global Head, Food and Agricultural Commodity Systems. And he is representing also the Future Food Systems Collaboration. We do have Caterina Ruggeri, the Senior Advisor at Systemic, and Caterina is representing also the Governance Action Area of the Food System Summit. We have Lee-Ann Jackson as well, the Head of the Agro-Food Trade and Markets Division at the OECD, and the OECD has just launched a policy report that emphasizes the multi-stakeholder collaboration and the systems approach. And now my question to all three of you, how do these two examples that we've just heard relate to the work on governance under the summit process, and what can the coalitions that are emerging under the UN Food Systems Summit learn from these examples? Floor is yours, and maybe we start with Andrew.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you, Martina. Pleasure to be here. And a big thanks to the two panelists, Pamela and Maria. I think you both did a fantastic job highlighting both the importance of multi-stakeholder collaboration in the governance of food systems, and also so many of the challenges that we face trying to support and promote effective multi-stakeholder collaboration. And that's really the key here for me, is how we help support and promote effective multi-stakeholder collaboration. It's one thing to bring diverse stakeholders into a room and even discuss issues, but to provide the expertise and the support that really allows stakeholders to learn about each other and to connect to each other and build trust between each other, and develop those relationships that then can allow for consensus and ownership and common vision. This is what we need to do if we are to transform food systems, but it's not easy. And what's been exciting with the Food Systems Summit is all of the member state food system dialogues that have been taking place over the last 9 months or so. And they've been a fantastic start in helping countries think about or build upon what they've done already to convene stakeholders. But there's only so much you can do in this time before the summit. And as I said, it takes so much time to really bring the stakeholders together to act collectively in an effective manner. So we're very excited about these food system dialogues. And so I'm at UNDP. I head up the food systems work at UNDP. And what we've been thinking about alongside FAO and UNEP and other UN agencies and other partners is how we can support this continued multi-stakeholder collaboration around dialogues, around pathways for food systems beyond the summit and into 2030, because this is a long-term effort that we all need to be part of. So we've been very much focused on post-summit. And so we did formulate an initiative called the Future of Food Systems Collaboration, which is all focused on this, the how. How do we make food systems change happen? How do we effectively bring these multi-stakeholders together around food system dialogues, either at a subnational level, a thematic area, or a national level, all according to what member states need and want. It has to be demand driven, but we can provide that support with regard to facilitation, backbone support, convening, so that future dialogues and collaboration is really and truly inclusive, participatory, and owned by the local stakeholders. So very quickly, with this sort of concept and initiative in mind, it emerged through the innovation lever. I head up the societal and institutional innovation working group because we believe that this is where it fits and we must move forward with societal institutional innovation. But more recently, we've been part of forming a coalition, which we hope will be at the summit, which is all around supporting member states and enabling them to support their pathways and their dialogues. And within this coalition, we've been merging with a solution cluster and action track 1. And the idea on the table is to form an integrated support facility that would interweave technical assistance with expertise and support around multi-stakeholder collaboration. And we're very excited about this because I think it's this combination which will really unleash and allow collaborative action to take place on the ground, and will allow other initiatives to sort of, if you want, plug and play into support of government activities. And just to finally say, we have been working hand in hand with many member states and Ireland, and I know Ireland is represented on this call, but the government of Ireland and the government of Norway have been part of the design of this coalition. Government of Sweden has been supporting it too, and there are many producer country member states, including Uganda, which we currently support, which we are very excited to bring into this coalition. And we look forward to co-creating this with all of you and with all the stakeholders as we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Also, well, highlighting so much that the summit obviously is a key rallying point, but it's not an end point. It's when really the work picks up and starts, and that we have given collectively a lot of thought also into how we can support the way forward. So thank you for that. With that, maybe Caterina, your thoughts?
Sure, thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here. And especially, I'm delighted to provide some comments on behalf of the Governance Action Solution of the Food System Summit, which, as some of you might know, has distilled in a policy brief the main insights of governance, which have emerged from all the different work streams of the summit. So with respect to the questions, I mean, these examples were really beautifully presented, and also really exciting example of why governance matters. And I'd like just to offer 3 quick reflections. One of them is, it seems to me that recognizing that food systems need to be governed and that the food system transformation needs to be governed is most probably one of the biggest achievements of the project, or the preparation phase of the summit. Well, the OECD we will hear shortly, the Food System Economics Commission, and a number of research and policy actors have put forward this view that governance is really important. We are hearing it for the first time for the national dialogues. So countries are aware of this, and as we have heard, there are a number of initiatives that we can build on. And I think Martina reminded us at the beginning on the importance of these multi-stakeholder processes for governance. And perhaps to add a note of realism, in a way also being very conscious of the debates at the moment around the summit. Dialogue and participation is wonderful, but it's really important that there are no substitute for true participation in policy decision making. So we should both celebrate all that has been achieved, but also be careful of how effective these policies, these dialogues can really be if they're not truly and genuinely tied into the decision making process. And finally, the Governance Action Solution Group has put forward the idea of a community of practice, which in many ways is really complementary to the work that Andrew mentioned earlier, to a number of other coalitions which are emerging. And the idea here would be to create a kind of safe space where countries can experiment, can explore different ideas, can exchange. And this is because we know that there is so much happening at the country level, and that it would be really helpful to kind of agree on some common principles that the food system transformation should follow, and trying to create the space for basically cross-fertilization across different stakeholders throughout the decision-making, the implementation, all different implementation levels, but also across countries. And so we would see this very much as complementary and an entry point for countries who then might want to pick up specific themes and join one of the specific thematic coalitions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Caterina. And with that, we move to Leanne. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much, Martina. It's really a pleasure to be here and to participate in this conversation, which I always find when I get into the UN Food Systems Summit dialogues spark a lot of ideas for me. So I'm trying to put them into a coherent structure. Maybe 3 reflections. One is, I think it's useful to think about why transformation is so difficult. And some of the work that we recently have done in my division looking at making better policies for food systems talks about how this relates not just to not having good evidence, but also to having differences in interests and values. And I think a lot of these multi-stakeholder types of initiatives are really important to thinking about how to bridge those differences. So that's one thing I'll talk about. The second is, you know, at the OECD, we really think about policies. And, you know, decades ago, there was often this feeling that there was a silver bullet, that you could find one policy. But we know when we're talking about food systems that really we need to talk about policy mixes. And this is particularly true when we're in a situation where we want a system to transform, because we also know that there's going to be potentially winners and losers as policies change. Again, I'll link that to the multi-stakeholder initiatives. And finally, just to pick up on some of the themes that have really been coming through from all the speakers, there is a way to think about these multi-stakeholder initiatives around architecture and making sure that they are truly inclusive, linkages back into policymaking, and inclusivity even around things like language. So I'll say a couple things about that. So just around facts, interests, and values, OECD is really in the business of producing facts about policy. So we have a monitoring report that shows that over the past 3 years, more than $700 billion US were put into transfers into agriculture. So that's a lot of money. That's about $2 billion a day. So if we're thinking about how we're going to change this kind of support in agriculture, we do need to think a lot about how interests and values show up when we're having these exchanges. And these multi-stakeholder dialogues can provide a process for actors, maybe picking up on a comment that came in for the example from Uganda, making sure that we get a full menu of stakeholders involved so that they can bring to the table what is driving their positions on certain issues, and having the dialogues can bridge these frictions across values. The second point is this thing about policy mixes. So rather than thinking about single solutions within government, we need to think about breaking down silos. And again, we've heard this theme come up both in the two examples that were given of Bolivia and Uganda, but also in the keynote speech from Cristina. We need to make sure that government officials are talking with each other, but we also need to make sure that they're thinking about what kinds of mixes of policies are going to be effective if we're actually going to get to this change. We had a really nice example from Uganda about the broader view of stakeholders within supply chains, thinking about value chain actors and identifying concretely who's affected and then bringing them in so that there could be a learning about who's affected and then consideration of what policies are needed to make sure that those that are affected, the trade-offs don't hit them in a too significant a way. And finally, I think it's important, and again, it's a theme that's been coming up around using multi-stakeholder initiatives to build trust and how much you need that trust to catalyze transformation. Our example from Bolivia, I think Maria Teresa commented that one piece of success for that initiative was that they had a successful track record. And when I heard her say that, I was thinking, oh, well, a successful track record is one step of building that trust. So you need to make sure that that the architecture of the dialogues are set up so that there is trust in the process. And you also need to capitalize on your successes so that you can build success step by step. And maybe just to, again, link back to the keynote comment, this takes time and there will have to be learning by doing. So also building into these initiatives some way of reflecting on what's working and what's not working. And I think Caterina also made that point just a minute ago, that there needs to be a system in place to reflect on what the learnings are. So maybe just one comment again about OECD work. There was a good recent report from the OECD Public Governance Directorate, which covers good practice principles for running deliberative processes. And we had a webinar a couple of months ago, which is available on a YouTube site if people are interested in hearing some of the insights that have also come out of the OECD on deliberative webinars. So just to wrap up, I think that this UN Food System Summit is really obviously one huge mammoth multi-stakeholder collaboration built of pieces of national stakeholder collaboration. And let's hope that we can all continue as we go beyond the summit this year in building these robust processes to take the transformation forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think there's a few things that really crystallize out of all the presentations that we've heard. And that the process matters a lot, being inclusive, providing a safe space, building trust. As part of being inclusive, really across the different levels of government, between different ministries, but also really along the value chain, and recognizing that there is a lot of room for synergies, and that we really actively have to tease them out so that we get to the wins, the win-wins, the triple wins if we can. But that we are conscious about some of the trade-offs that may have to be made at the end of the day, but addressing them full on, and looking for the packages of solutions to address them. So I thought that was quite interesting to come out. I think we heard quite a bit already as well, how things connect to the summit through the different cross-cutting action areas, but also how we look at a process going beyond. Those were a couple of questions that came in, how we connected to the summit, but I think those were quite nicely addressed already. There's one more question from Yasmin Mahmood. How can multi-stakeholder governance help us to address specific challenges faced by the low-income and developing countries, such as water scarcity, food insecurity? And I think it really is about this question of how do we get to the win-wins? And maybe for each of you, a quick point on that before we move on. I don't know who would like to give it a start. I see Leanne nodding. Maybe if you like,
yes.
Just go ahead.
Just a quick reflection. Again, because the OECD is really an organization that's focusing on policies. One of the things that our evidence shows from monitoring the way agricultural and food policies are implemented is that often those policies go in directions that move away from sustainability and away from resilience. So they concentrate resources onto particular types of farms, for example, but they're not creating conditions that are inclusive and creating opportunities for the sector and for the value chain to adapt. And we know that the food system is going to have to adapt because we're facing lots of new types of risks. So one thing is to have policymakers being thoughtful about what it really means to be supporting sustainable, resilient food systems and moving off of the traditional types of support, which create kind of a more rigid kind of sector. You want a sector that can adapt.
Okay. Thanks, Leanne. Maybe just moving backwards, how we had you come in on this panel. So, Caterina, if you like for a reaction.
Yes, I think that no country is too poor to make sure that what they're doing is consistent. And I think the point that Leanne just made about agricultural support is a glaring one. But I think the more we are aware of the complexities in terms of all the different objectives and all the different phenomena that are happening, the synergies and the trade-offs, that would call, I think, for a big focus on policy coherence. And if I may, I think that initiatives like the ones we've been discussing today can really help find the right level for a given solution. There might be something that needs to be worked out at the watershed level. There might be something which needs to be worked out at the country regional level. So I think this is really in a way, it's really the size of the challenge is that there will not be one solution that will be applied uniformly everywhere. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Caterina. Andrew, that's very much bread and butter at UNDP. So
yes, yes. So I'll keep it very simple. I think if we all want policies, in this case around water, that are supportive of the poor, the smallholder farmers, we have to have those stakeholders and beneficiaries at the table with a voice, explaining their interests and their needs, and to have those as part of the discussion and formulation around policy. Too often, policy is made in silos, in government offices that we support, But I think with those, the more participatory those policy formulations can be, hopefully it's a step towards unlocking that those policies actually fit the needs of the poorest. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And maybe back to Maria Teresa and to Pamela quickly. After everything you heard, is this, you know, are you hopeful that the processes set up with the summit will help you in going further than where you have been already, where you ended up?
Yeah, thank you. Certainly.
I think we have a problem. Pamela, we don't hear you anymore.
And I do
Pamela, I'm sorry, we don't hear you. The connection is really bad.
Are you hearing me now? Hello? Sorry.
Yep.
Go ahead then. Go ahead. Hello?
We now hear you.
Oh, okay.
No, we don't hear you anymore.
I was just saying that indeed, yeah. Too bad. No worries. No worries.
Apologies.
No worries. No worries.
Maybe I'll jump in.
Please. Very briefly, because Tom is waiting for us.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I would just like to add, I think Andrew brought some really important points to the table. And I think in terms of the summit this year, I think what makes, what builds so much opportunity is the fact that it's finally an issue that's on the table with a name and last name. I think especially for organizations working grassroots initiatives, it's been really difficult and challenging to convince a lot of different actors that there's a problem because the problem hadn't been spelled out quite yet. And so I think it's a great opportunity for all countries and all institutions to finally recognize that we have a shared problem and we need to find shared solutions together. And I think that's where what Andrew was saying is so important, because we really do need to work on this together. And we need to make sure that the voices of the people who understand the challenges on the ground every day, whether you're a farmer or a driver or a supermarket or a traditional market, I think all these people need to be telling us exactly what the challenges are. And I think the rest of us really need to be up to the challenge of helping to generate the evidence to support the arguments of the local stakeholders. So I think that's where also, you know, the role of academia and many of us who do a lot of food systems research also need to partner up with local stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We now have come to the end of the panel, and there is an opportunity to interact with all of you in the audience. We want to run a quick call on principles for multi-stakeholder collaboration, and they will be coming up on the screen. And we would like to ask you to choose the 3 principles that you find most important. And you do see them on the screen. We have put forward 7. Not sure I should read through them, but very briefly, develop a shared understanding of the key issues to be addressed. Collaboration should be context specific, locally owned. Establish multi-stakeholder structures that are accessible and inclusive. Design for an inclusive and adaptable journey that addresses emerging trends, power imbalances, and challenges from different perspectives. Then the point about proactively promoting and reinforcing the right to effective participation and to think differently about implementation. The 6th is gauge and manage risk in multi-stakeholder dialogues. And the 7th, develop common and agreed upon food-related policies that balance different interests and goals. So 3, if you could click on them, and maybe we park this at the side while we now then, before we get back to the results on it, that I will do, obviously, I will report back on that. We, in the meantime, go to Tom Arnold, the Special Envoy on Food Systems of Ireland. And Tom, we're very pleased to have you with us for a quick overview of Ireland's recently finalized national process on defining, well, the agri-food strategy, and highlighting to us, for us, a few key challenges as well as the success factors in the process.
Okay, thank you very much, Martina. Yes, I want to talk about the process we've just been through in Ireland, which has taken us about 18 months to develop an agri-food strategy up to 2030, but using a food systems approach to do that. Now, we have some advantages in Ireland in that we have gone through since the year 2000. This is the 5th multi-stakeholder strategy for developing, multi-stakeholder process for developing strategy within the agri-food sector. But this one was different in the sense that it was explicitly using a food systems approach. It was acknowledging the interconnectedness between policies for food, for the environment, and for health in particular. And we were attempting to identify within those where were the synergistic aspects of policy, because you can't connect everything across the board. You have to make choices. So that, I think, it was a critical part of what we were doing. And the other basic part of our terms of reference was we were asked to provide a vision and strategy and policies to ensure that the sector, the agri-food sector, would achieve sustainability in its 3 dimensions of economic, environmental, and social sustainability for up to the period up to 2030. So I think that's what we were set out to do. We started our work at the end of 2019, just before COVID, and of course COVID impacted on it. So we ended up spending longer than we had anticipated. It took us altogether about 16 months to develop a draft strategy, and then that draft strategy was put out for public consultation. And taking account of what emerged in that public consultation, the final strategy will be launched this coming Wednesday in 2 days' time by the Prime Minister. So that's basically the approach we've taken. I think the critical thing that I think we have achieved is that we have spelled out decade-long policies to achieve economic, environmental, and social sustainability. Now, there's a big question then as to how this will be implemented. This is really the next step. So I'd like to conclude by just looking forward to what I think are important in that implementation. First of all, if you're talking about a decade-long vision, you have to break it down into parts and probably parts about a 3 to 4 year set of policies. And here it means that you're selecting from your decade-long vision, you're selecting priorities. So that, I think, is the first task of governments. The principle of just transition, how you achieve change. We have stressed that as being critically important. But I think the most important thing perhaps we have done, I hope this is the case, is that we have developed a broad political and societal consensus about the way forward and about the necessity to put sustainability at the heart of agri-food policy for the next decade. And indeed, that's this contribution we will be taking to the pre-summit and to the summit and saying that this is a commitment that Ireland has made, and we think it has relevant lessons for many other countries in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this is a wonderful inspiration also for others, for other countries, as we move ahead in the Food Systems Summit, the preparations and the whole process. With that, I'd like to hand over to Alwin Kopse. He's the Head of International Affairs and Food Security at the Federal Office of Agriculture of Switzerland, and also a co-lead of the One Planet Network Sustainable Food Systems Program, for a quick summary of the most salient points from the session.
Yeah.
Alwin.
Thank you, Martina, and indeed, thank you to all speakers for, I think, a very interesting and a very dense session. I think it's quite a difficult task to quickly summarize it and wrap it up. So I took several points from this discussion. I think the first one starts with a recognition that there is actually such a thing like food systems, and that these food systems need a transformation, and that this transformation needs governance. So it's a lot about processes, and it's about time, because governance takes time. Food systems are complex and involve a very diverse set of stakeholders. That's why we need to involve those stakeholders, and stakeholder partnerships are important, but these stakeholder partnerships, they need to fulfill or meet certain principles like inclusivity, for example. So in order to make these partnerships and these multi-stakeholder mechanisms action-oriented and successful, I think a very important notion was that they need to fit and be anchored in a local food and environment. There's a lot about trust. You need to trust each other. And these mechanisms, they also need to be able to take a systems view, so that you really can tackle the food system really from a holistic and systems approach. This means, again, that you don't only need to involve all the actors and stakeholders, but they need to have a voice. And this voice needs to actually help, or needs to enable those dialogues, those multi-stakeholder mechanisms, to be able to deal with different interests and values, because that's where finally the challenges lay, and where you need to make trade-offs need to be made. Another important point was the linkage between those multi-stakeholder mechanisms and policy processes. So in order to move policy, the formal policy processes in the right direction of sustainable food systems, these links, they need to reach out into different policy areas led by different ministries and institutions, and that's where you add another layer of complexity. But these links, they need to make sure that policy coherence can actually move forward. Another important points were, I think, legitimacy and trust are really important in order to make those links back to policy making successful. And in order to do that, I think many countries, they need a kind of a safe space in order to experiment how to do that. And I think this links now back to the Food System Summit. Many countries, they already went, or they are going through these exercises of National Food System Summit dialogues. I think that's a wonderful space to bring actors together. And also very, very good to hear is actually that there are coalitions starting to be developed in order to support member states and stakeholders in this very important question, how to make these multi-stakeholder mechanisms that are so important really effective. That's all from me in a nutshell. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alwin. And obviously quite a challenge to summarize a rich discussion with all these experiences in a very short time. So thank you for that. Now we are ready to show the poll results as well. And we have a winner with the context-specific, locally owned statement, but then followed by the need to develop a shared understanding of the key issues and establishing multi-stakeholder structures to have an anchoring as well institutionally. So I think that is quite interesting indeed. We had promised that open questions would be dealt with directly afterwards, so apologize for if your question has not been addressed by the panel, but we'll try and do so afterwards. And I think what is clear out of the session is we all know why we need to change the food systems. There is quite a bit of action and experience evolving on the how. We need to go further on this. You've seen as well quite a bit commitment of all the agencies involved in this to actually put into place a suite of integrated and concrete post-summit operational support to member states and to work along the lines of multi-stakeholder collaboration. And with that, I would like to invite all our speakers to put on their cameras so that we can do a family photo. And obviously, I really thank you wholeheartedly for all your contributions. Pleasure working together in this, and obviously going forward, continuing doing so. And while we do take that family photo, I wish you all the best, and I thank you for your attendance in this. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Ciao, ciao.